Well, anyway, I'm Chris. I don't need a slide to say I'm Chris. Hi. I run a trade organization for home inspectors. I've been a developer for many, many years. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Let's see. Yeah. Not quite. I do have one thing that I want my slide for, which is... Hey! All right. And I'm going to be talking about contributing to open source, particularly contributing to Laravel, hopefully. But before I get to that, I just want to point out, if anyone here is interested in getting into like a cool Laravel Mastodon instance, artisan.dev, check it out. I will send you guys invites. And I have a podcast called Overengineered, which is fun, and check it out if you want. I got stickers if anybody wants. Cool. So I'm going to talk about open source contributions. Who here contributes to some open source project? Yeah? A little bit. Does anybody maintain an open source project? No. Okay, cool. I've been thinking a little bit about why would you do it? And there's it feels good to do. I encourage people to try because it's not as scary, and I'm going to be talking about ways to make it less scary. And I have found that getting into open source has really opened me up to the community of other people who are in that space. And obviously everyone here is interested in being part of a programming community, so I think it's a great way to open that up to a larger part of the world. And it's also just kind of a fun way to challenge yourself. I'm going to be specifically focusing on contributions to Laravel because ostensibly many of us are Laravel developers or interested in Laravel. But pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about translates to pretty much any open source project. And real quick, why should you listen to me? So I have submitted almost 70 pull requests to Laravel. Almost half have been merged. So I don't know, I think that's an okay merge rate. And I also maintain a bunch of open source projects myself. Most notably of late is Verbs, which if you don't know what it is, check it out. It's very cool. So I'm going to tell a little story. So I started developing software professionally in around 1997. And kind of until about 2010, I was just totally in a silo. I knew nobody. I was doing my own thing. I was beholden to no one. Just here working on our project, which I was the sole developer for many years. And then we brought on one other person, but he basically just did everything the way I wanted because that was how it was. And around 2010, 2011, I started getting interested more in JavaScript and Node. And that was kind of my introduction to open source. And then it wasn't really until 2016 that I really got exposed to Laravel. So that was the first time I worked with Laravel, and I had already been sort of dabbling a little bit with open source. So I'm here's this incredible framework. We've committed to using it for our project moving forward. And I've got stuff that I want to change, so I'm going to go and submit a PR. I'm all excited. I've got all these great ideas. They're the best ideas, of course. I'm super excited. So I put together my first PR. Really hopeful. I'm just waiting. I'm hitting refresh to see. And we get the famous. And, that first time, that hurt. I'm just man, but I put all this work into this thing and I really cared about it. Come on. So I want to talk a little bit about what went wrong and sort of some of the lessons that I've learned over the years that took the majority of those 30-some closed PRs in the earlier times to where I am now, where I have a much better close rate, I guess. So I'm going to talk about three different sort of classifications of issues. And the first one is just don't do this because you're just going to get insta-closed. And there's really only three. Kind of the worst offense is just a PR that is just thousands of changes. And you see this, people just like are really enthusiastic. They have this big feature that they want to contribute. They put a ton of time into it, and like now you've just put 3,000 lines of code for someone else to review into a queue for an open source maintainer. And I loved this. Recently, Taylor was on, I'm pretty sure this was on the Tuple podcast. He said, my favorite pull requests are 2 lines changed, but immense developer value added. Like, obviously, he was kind of joking. That's a little hard to pull off, but in an ideal world, every PR would be like, I'm changing one thing, and it's amazing. Right? So that's what we're shooting for. The second thing is contributing breaking changes. Sometimes you do have a breaking change, but you need to think about, like, is there a way to do this where it's non-breaking? Because maybe like you are messing with an interface, but you can just add the feature and it's available, but it's not like going to require anyone who's implementing that interface to add the new function or something like that. So sometimes you can get away with just not breaking anything. Other times you just want to be thinking like, okay, Laravel 11 just is just about to come out, right? Now is not a great time to submit a breaking change, right? They've already kind of locked everything in 4 weeks or whenever Laravel 11 does come out. That's not a good time to submit a breaking change either, because it's like they just committed to this new change. It's going to be a whole release cycle before any new breaking changes can happen. So like, you want to wait like 6 or 8 months and then start like proposing something if it really does need to be breaking. And then the kind of third offender is these like, oh, well, I was editing files and I just like hit auto format in my IDE and I submitted it all. And you laugh, but like this happens all the time. And it's just like, oh, you changed 1 line in 2 files and it's like 800 lines diff. This is something that I think there's the like sort of funny part of it, but this is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes people can make is just like look at the way that code in the framework or in the project that you're contributing to is written. Follow their style guide, no matter what, even if you don't agree with it, right? I personally love tabs, screw spaces, but I use spaces when I contribute to Laravel because that's what Laravel does. Usually if a project will have Pint or PHP CSS in it, just run that on the files before you commit. And if anyone does maintain a project that doesn't have like a published code style, like I really encourage it because it makes it so much easier for people to contribute. The second sort of class is just, these are avoidable mistakes. You can sometimes get away with them, but like you don't necessarily have to. So Caleb Porzio, the maintainer of Livewire, recently talked about this. When you submit a PR to a project from the main branch or from the master branch, whatever it is, it makes it a little bit harder for open source maintainers to work with that PR. So this is just like, it's an easy thing. Always create a new branch in your fork. We just do it, and then it's never an issue. Some open source projects actively say like, we insta-close anything that's PR'd from main. Others, it's just kind of annoying to the maintainer, so just don't do it because there's no reason. But it's just like an easy thing to learn. There's also this whole sort of question of like, maybe you're excited about this thing, and maybe it's really big, and maybe it really just ought to be its own package. And like, this is a hard one for me because like, it's way more interesting to get the feature like merged into Laravel than it is to release my own package. But a lot of times it's just like, every time we add new code to a project, it's shifting the burden of maintaining that to the team. So like, you got to be thinking about that. Like, is there a way to do this differently? Another mistake that I definitely made earlier on, and I try to be really conscious of, is just developing features in a vacuum, like developing things that actually no one really wants. And this is an actual screenshot from one of my PRs. This is the sole reaction that I got before it got closed. Because like, I built something that I just kind of got in my head about, and like, I didn't stop to think, is this something that anybody needs? Is this something that like actually matters? And like, if I had talked to anyone about it, I would have realized pretty quickly, like, oh, there's other places that I should be spending my time. But like, it's easy to just kind of get excited about an idea and not step back and think. So talk to other people. This is another like simple procedural one. Just don't PR from like a super messy branch, right? Sometimes you work on something, you move away from it, you have to merge in conflicts, you move away from it again, and that's what happened here. I just kept on coming back to a thing, and I had to resolve conflicts over and over and over again. And what I should have done is just squash all that up, or pull all my changes into a fresh branch or something like that. This is another sort of simple procedural thing that you can do that just is going to make everyone's lives a lot easier. Another one is kind of going back to that breaking change question. I don't know if you can see this perfectly, but PRing something at the wrong time. Let's look at these dates up here, right? Laracon 2017, the first Laracon I ever went to, is July 2017. I submit a 3,000 line pull request at the beginning of July 2017. I wonder why Taylor said this would be too large for me to review. Arguably, that pull request was just too big anyway, although there was a caveat there. But, what are they going to do? They're like in the midst of finalizing like all the details for Laracon. There's just no way that this makes sense. So like, just think about if you need someone to have particularly like a lot of space to look at something, when are they going to be able to do that? And you can kind of get around it. And this one is a little tongue-in-cheek, but if you can avoid adding new files, just don't. In my experience, like the first new file that you submit to like a project, you've just decreased the likelihood of your PR getting merged by half, right? Like if I'm looking at a PR and it's 3 changes to 3 files, that's one thing. If I'm looking at a PR and it's 6 new classes, it's like a whole other consideration. And so obviously, sometimes you can't avoid adding new files, but if there's a way, and this goes for tests as well, like, go in, find the existing tests in the test suite, add new tests to the existing tests. Don't just like submit a bunch of new test files. Okay, so I've said a lot about what you shouldn't do. What should you do? These are some what I consider best practices. This is my opinion. And I think that most of these I have found certainly are true for contributing to Laravel. I think they're true for contributing to a lot of open source projects. Some maintainers have totally different opinions, right? So there's 6 of these. The first one is just coming back to keep PRs as small as like possible, and this is the big one. It's so much easier to get 3 small PRs merged than it is to get 1 big PR merged. So I think a lot about like, can I phase this out over a couple of chunks? Like, can I find, and I'll do this, I'll do it where I'll develop a whole feature, right? And then I'll look at the whole feature and I'll kind of say, okay, can I pull out like this little thing that has enough utility that I can submit that as its own pull request, get that in, and then take the next thing, and then finally submit the 3rd PR that kind of like puts it all together into this new feature. And like the nice thing about that is, okay, maybe the 3rd pull request doesn't get merged, but you've like contributed something useful, and you've made it easier for the maintainers to process. So I think that's like really helpful, and like especially going back to the breaking change stuff. There have been a lot of times where I'll find something that I want to change, and like we'll be near the end of a release cycle. This happened specifically like around some scheduling stuff a couple years ago. There were maybe 3 or 4 changes that I made to the existing release that kind of staged everything and got that in, and then there were like 2 other PRs that went over to the master branch that were the breaking changes that I had kind of like led up to it, so it made sense and it was possible. And that's like usually a great way to approach it. Also, just always end tests. This should go without saying, but no PR has ever gotten closed for having too many tests. And scratch your own itch. This kind of comes out of, I think, that same episode of the Tuple podcast that Taylor was on. There are definitely PRs that you kind of see someone had an idea and they decided to like PR it because they had the idea. They didn't have the need. And like you can tell, I definitely have seen this in our projects as well. You just kind of start to get a sixth sense for it. It's like, someone thought that this could be configurable, so they're making it configurable, but no one would ever need to configure it. And I think a lot of more seasoned maintainers will, notice that as well, and it's a lot less likely to get merged. And another really big one is like sometimes it just doesn't work out. You had a great idea, maybe you didn't have a great idea. Who knows? But like in the end, it's down to the maintainer of the project to decide. And like sometimes you lose, and like it doesn't. It could be that they were legitimately wrong. It could be even that like you were fixing a legitimate bug and they just don't understand it. But like at a certain point, it doesn't help anyone to be to fight about it. It's just like, okay, this one I didn't win out on. It's time to move on. And I have this. Read the docs. I mean, obviously, always read the docs. Most projects have a contributing file of some sort. I have this asterisk, though, because in my experience, this isn't so much true of Laravel. It's definitely true of smaller projects or projects that have like less maintenance behind them, where someone starts it up, they find some contributing file, they put it in their project, and then they never look at it, never think about it again. So you want to be starting from there, but I think that's the starting point, and then you want to look at, well, what actually gets done in this project? Go look at some of the PRs that have been merged. Look at what was expected of them, because sometimes those two things don't line up. But it's a good place to start. And on that same note, just in general, I think if there's like one takeaway from this whole talk, it's spend more time reading the code that you're contributing to. Try to synthesize like the vibes, right? Like, is everyone here a Laravel developer? I mean, just about. Like we all know sort of the ethos of like what good Laravel code is. We all like I'm just like, okay, I need to do this thing. I bet you if I go into that file, there's going to be an empty method that's ready for me to put my like little thing in that's called from the class. I know that's there, and so you want to be thinking about that. Like you may approach it one way, but the Laravel way is to do it this way, and like you're always going to be better off. Your chances of it getting merged are way better off if you stick to sort of the approach that the project takes. But also, we all benefit from it because, like, we all know how Laravel feels, and we know where to look and what to expect. So it's kind of like, okay, I could do it this way because that's my slight preference, but I'm gonna do it the Laravel way because it's gonna get merged, and people are gonna look for this thing there. They're gonna expect it there, and that's just like, I really do think. Of all the things that you can do, like taking twice the time to really think through, does this fit with the project, is the biggest bang for buck. And then this is like my little bonus. Sometimes you have to write out a big detailed description of what's happening, but also like the longer your PR description, the harder it is for someone to like parse it. So GitHub supports the details tag. And you can just like put a little details thing in there, and sometimes like I'll know that someone's going to need to sort of understand in this case like this is why PHP unit does inheritance the way it does, but I don't want that like extra block of text to make the PR feel as overwhelming as it could be. It's just like a neat little tip. So those are the rules. But like sometimes you just have to swing for the fences. So I have one more story. This was a PR that I submitted a while ago. And you can see, it's 3,000 lines changed. This was practically a novel to read.
Good feedback.
Yeah, but some good feedback. I broke all of these rules in here, But yeah, super well received. Graham Campbell, who usually is in there just saying this is a breaking change, it shouldn't be committed. Like is out on Twitter, like even talking about this PR. It's great. And sometimes it works out. That PR got merged. It was incredible. Felt great. And then sometimes it doesn't. And this time I had been through it enough times to know, like, okay, like, what did I just say? I'm asking Taylor to take on these 3,000 changes for the rest of time. Like, it's his call, and his call was, this is just a little too much. And in the end, it turned out that I was able to commit a different version of that was 2 files with like 4 lines in each that got almost all the value, right? Without any of the maintenance burden. So like, there's the happy ending to the story, but sometimes it doesn't work like that. And yeah, in the end, like this was great. I don't know if anyone kind of followed that, but like if you Laravel 8, you always had to think about, okay, is this a base query builder or an eloquent query builder? And now we have those 2 query builder contracts that like you just type in it. It doesn't matter if it's a base builder or an eloquent builder or a relation. You just get it. And because of the way IDEs work, we're just able to put a little single annotation at the top of the file, and you get all the upside and none the downside. So, what did we learn today? Does anyone watch Taskmaster? Oh man, I thought there'd be at least one person. This is a fantastic British comedy show. Go watch it. But they always end with what did we learn today? Contributing to open source, you have to let go of your ego, right? That you are giving your code to the community. It no longer belongs to you. You're asking the maintainers of the project to take this code on. And it really, you have to be thinking about like what's good for the project, what's good for the community, what's good for the code, not like what's best for me. And another big piece of letting go of your ego is you just have to learn to tolerate rejection. You do get rejected sometimes, and that's just part of the process. And an easy trap to fall into is I just did all this work, right, and it just got closed. But you doing all that work and throwing it on someone's door doesn't like entitle you to anything. So you just need to like be a little zen about it. Like I said, sometimes it just doesn't work out, and you have to let it go. And the other big piece of this is think about how your changes are going to affect the maintainers of this code, because like you may think that you're going to be around forever, right? In the Laravel community, or like back when I was doing a bunch of Node work, like yeah, I was right there, ready to help debug the thing that I had contributed, right? But I haven't written Node code in years. And like, I don't care about that thing anymore, like whatever, right? So you're not always necessarily going to be there to help. So it really is like when you put that into the project, now the maintainers of this code are responsible for it basically forever. So just think about like, what are you asking them to commit to? And also like, is there any pushback from the community that they're going to have to put up with because they pulled this in? Because like, you know, there have been some things that have been added to the framework over times that have been contentious, and it's like, it's not the person who pull requested that feature, it's the maintainers of the framework who have to deal with all that pushback. And similarly, like, think about how your changes are going to affect the project. That code is going to be there forever. You're changing the shape of this thing forever. So, you know, you got to think about the bigger picture and think about, like, is this the right thing? Even though, like, I want it, right? Is this the right thing for whatever the project happens to be? But all that said, like, I have gotten so much from contributing open source. I feel like, you know, I've been programming for, you know, 30 years or whatever, like, and like, I thought I was a good developer before, but I leveled up so much when I had to, like, work in these contexts. And I've made a ton of friends. I've, like, feel like I'm part of a different community. I've been exposed to a bunch of different ways to approach things that I just would have never thought of. Like, everyone thinks differently. Maybe we work in a team and we already feel like some of that, but, like, when you're exposed to the entire community of the Laravel world, like, of course, you're just gonna see things in a different light. And it feels great to do. So really, I encourage everybody to go for it. Hit me up, I'm here to help. So thank you.